Appeals meeting of October 19, 2010 to order. We would ask that you stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time we'd like to introduce the board members, starting at my right.
Jim Hilly,
Nancy Plesnarski,
Scott Kilgore,
Gary Willis.
John McCrae,
Walt Weecook,
and Todd Chernick.
This time we'd like to approve the September meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from September.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Scott Kilgore. Any discussion? All in favor of approval, raise your right hand. Let it be known that it passed 7-0. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-legal board composed of resident volunteers of the City of Milton. The board is charged with hearing requests for variances from the standards of the zoning ordinance and appeals of administrative determinations. With regard to decisions on primary variances, the board's basis for decision is provided by these four considerations. A, relief, if granted, would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance. And B, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. And C, relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. And D, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and that substantial justice is done. Our first primary variance today is V10010 to allow a fire pit to be located in the minimum side yard. Angela, will you please present?
This is petition V10010. The address is 705 Quarterpath Lane. The requested variance is to allow a fire pit to be located in the minimum side yard. The site, 705 Quarterpath Lane, is located in the Wood Valley subdivision in the Northwest Fulton overlay. It consists of 1.09 acres and is zoned AG1. The property is located on the corner of Quarterpath Lane and Freemanville Road. The City of Milton zoning ordinance states that the front yard of a corner lot is the side with the shortest frontage. Therefore, the applicant's front yard is the side along Freemanville Road, making the Quarterpath Lane frontage the side corner. The Bacon's house faces Quarterpath Lane. The area that appears to be their backyard is actually the side yard. The Bacons obtained a permit for a pool and patio from the City of Milton. While inspecting the pool construction, the city inspector noticed that the patio included a fire pit. He informed the owners that there may be a problem with the location of the fire pit. The Bacon's patio includes a fire pit with a 16-inch tall bench wall in the rear of their house. Placed approximately 15 feet from the side property line, the fire pit is located in the minimum side yard, which is 25 feet. Section 6477 2B2 states that outdoor fireplaces may only be located in the rear yard and may extend no more than 10 feet into the minimum rear yard. Therefore, a variance is required. Courtesy review was performed by the City of Milton Design Review Board on October 5, 2010. The board offered the following comments. Petition may not meet variance considerations as the hardship was caused themselves. However, it does not adversely affect existing uses. Suggested obtaining a letter of support from adjacent neighbor. Additional department comments. The staff held a focus meeting on October 6th at which the following comments were provided. Building plan review, site plan review, arborist, and DOT all had no comment. Standards for consideration. The approval of a variance is based on the following considerations. Relief, if granted, would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance. there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. Relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured, and that substantial justice is done. The applicant addresses the considerations as follows. Relief, if granted, would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance. Due to the location of the house and the property, installing the fire pit in our backyard would cause an undue hardship on us, as well as our neighbor. Not to mention, it would be visible from the street. Relief, if granted, would not cause a detriment to the public good or surrounding properties. Relief would ensure that public safety, health, and welfare are secured, and that substantial justice is done. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. Staff has no conditions at this time. This concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you. Any questions from the board to the staff? At this time, we would like for the applicant to come forward and present their application. If you would, please state your name and address.
My name is Randy Bacon, 705 Quarter Path Lane, Milton. We have here a letter of approval from the neighbors, as well as the adjacent neighbors have appeared.
Thank you. Anything that you would like to tell us about this?
Just continue on with the hardship, though. Don't understand why, really, that it doesn't, I understand the zoning.
Questions from the board to the applicant? Yes, sir.
Mr. Bacon, have you received any letters from any of your adjoining neighbors, either agreeing or disagreeing with allowing this?
No, sir.
Have you spoken with your neighbor next door to where your pit is nearest to?
Yes.
And remember now, you may be under oath. I'm not sure we did that or not. But anyway, what did they say? Are they in agreement or
Here's the
disagreement?
letter.
Oh, okay.
Is this your back?
Is that the neighbor that's nearest the pit?
The neighbor that's nearest to the pit is not in our neighborhood, but
Right.
she's behind us. Her name is Mrs. Stewart, and she is, she's sorry that I had to go through this, and she hopes that it goes well for me, is what she told me.
And is that who that letter's from?
No, that is signed by everybody in my neighborhood.
Okay.
She is not signed.
Okay.
But I did tell her that the meeting was today and the last design review board meeting.
And is there a Mrs. Stewart here? Okay. All right. And she said everything was okay? And
Yeah.
okay. That's all my questions.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So it appears that the encroachment you're looking for is based on an existing structure that you went forward and built.
It's not completed. It's not fire bricked. There's nothing in the middle of it. Took a huge gamble on that this was going to get pulled through for me.
Okay.
Well, it's
And
been-
so what's the exact amount of encroachment that you're needing?
Don't know the dollar amount.
No, in feet. How many feet are you encroaching into the side yard as this is defined?
Maybe 10 feet.
Okay? Because we'll stipulate that, and that's what we need to know.
I don't know an exact amount. Maybe 10 feet.
Can staff address that? Do we
10
know?
feet.
It's 10 feet.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. This time, we'd like to open the floor to any public comment. If you're here, come up one at a time. State your name and your address, and give your card to Angela, please. And
Good evening. My name is Kennard Woods, and my wife Emily and I are the next door neighbors of the Bacons. We live at 715 Quarter Path. I'm speaking in support of the Bacon's request. As was stated earlier, the Bacon's house faces Quarter Path Lane, and that's the same as all the houses along Quarter Path Lane. All of our houses face Quarter Path Lane. The Bacon's fire pit, therefore, in reality, when looked at from Quarter Path Lane, is consistent with the other construction and the location of the houses along Quarter Path Lane. In fact, I believe it would be an anomaly, certainly in appearance, as was earlier stated, if the fire pit had to be located anywhere else. So, again, speaking in support of Bacon's request.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other public comment?
I'll have to complete this. This is David Knotts with Fulton County Schools. And actually, I'm the new land agent for Fulton County Schools, and we got a notice, so I'm here tonight. A little bit of learning curve, so I had some questions to ask. Is the fire pit on Quarter Path Lane, or is it on Freemanville?
Both, I think. It's a corner lot.
It's a corner lot.
It's physically at the corner. And trying to understand would there be any repercussions as relates to the school property with the location of the fire pit? That's my question to...
Where does the school have a property?
Well, we actually own property on the other side of Freemanville.
It's diagonally across from this is where it is.
Where's the school?
And you're a good bit away from,
It's along that line.
Here's the aerial. That's Freemanville. So is it right there?
Where's your property?
I thought he said Freemanville.
Right here?
Where's the school?
Where is that?
There's Quarter Path.
He-
She provided clarity. Thank you. I got the notice.
Right here?
It was late for our own interdepartment mail, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll fill this card out.
Thank you.
All this up there.
yeah. But they don't own that corner lot.
We're in favor of it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Any other public comment? At this time, as the applicant, you have the opportunity to come back up and state anything else you'd like to say or make any rebuttal comments. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Okay. Any additional questions for the board, for staff from the board?
I do have one question.
Yes, sir,
for
go ahead.
staff. Should this applicant have followed proper procedure, would that entail them pulling a permit for this, or just seeking a variance?
Typically, the fire pit or fireplace does require a permit. I think the same people that did the patio area, the stonework around the pool, did the stonework for the fire pit, and they were unaware that it required a separate permit, so they just kind of did it all at once, and that's when our inspector found out. But typically, yes, it is permitted just for this reason.
Okay. And would staff have any input as to what the typical fees are for that?
It's based on the cost of construction, and I'm not sure what the formula is.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? At this time, I'd like to close the public hearing. And now the floor is open for a motion. Mr. Rico.
Yes, sir. I'd like to make a motion for approval of this variance, V10-10. This is to allow a fire pit to be located in the minimum side yard setback. The maximum amount of the encroachment would be 10 foot into the side yard setback. And they would have to get any additional permits that may be required for properly permitting the structure. I'm making this recommendation because I feel like it's going to be in keeping with the neighborhood, that there's not any problems within the community for what was created, and it looks like he's going to have a big party for all of his homeowners, and especially the ones that came up and spoke for him. So, and there's no extraordinary exceptional conditions involving this project.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Scott Kilgore. Any discussion?
Yeah, I would just clarify Walt's last comment there. I feel that this property does have extraordinary and exceptional conditions to it, giving it being a corner lot, and therefore, is that what your intent was?
That's correct, that's
Okay.
correct.
All right.
Sorry.
Any other discussion? Let's vote. We have a motion to approve V10-10 to allow a fire pit to be located in a minimum side yard with a maximum encroachment of 10 feet into the side yard setback, and the applicant will pay any additional permit fees for this structure through the City of Milton that is required. All in favor, please raise your right hand. All opposed, let it be known that it passed 7-0. Thank you very much, and congratulations. Our next case is V10-011 to allow a house to encroach into the minimum side yard setback. Angela, will you, when you get ready, if you're ready, please present.
Okay. V10-001, 125 Roxbury Road. Requested variance is to allow a house to encroach into the minimum side yard setback. 011, yes. The site, 125 Roxbury Road, is a single-family residence located on a lot just over 1 acre. The property is located in the Roxbury Estate subdivision, which is zoned AG1. It is in the Northwest Fulton overlay. The owners, Lou and Kim Bader, purchased their home in May of 2010. During the process of building a pool in their backyard, the Baders became aware that a portion of the house had been built 10.94 feet into the 25-foot side yard setback. At its closest, the house is 14.06 feet from the property line. Further investigation showed that while the house was shown in the correct place on the permitting documents approved by Fulton County, it was built in the wrong place. This mistake was not discovered until recently. Section 64-416I states that the minimum side yard is 25 feet. No structures are to be located in this setback. Since the existing house is located in the minimum side yard, a variance is required. A courtesy review was performed by the City of Milton Design Review Board on October 5, 2010. The board offered the following comments. Add an evergreen screen, if permitted, to plant in the drainage easement. The staff held a focus meeting on October 6, 2010, at which time the following comments were provided. Building plan review, site plan review, the arborist, DOT had no issues. Standards for consideration. The approval of a variance is based on the following considerations. Relief, if granted, will not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance. There are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. Relief, if granted, will not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured, and that substantial justice is done. The applicant addresses the considerations as follows. The intent of Section 64-416 is to provide adequate space between the houses and to protect the aesthetics of the neighborhood by limiting the size of the homes. The Baders' residence, while partly out of compliance with Section 64416C1, does not materially violate either of these objectives. At its closest point, the house is still more than 14 feet from the property line, and the home is similar in size and design to the residences of their neighbors. If the Baders' variance application is granted, therefore, it would not offend either the spirit or the intent of Section 64416, and is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning resolution. Similarly, granting the variance application would cause no detriment, much less any substantial detriment, to the public good or surrounding properties. In fact, no one even noticed that there was an issue with the location of the house until over 2 years after it was built. On the other hand, it would create an unnecessary hardship for the Bader family to have to try to remedy this minor encroachment. Put simply, it would be prohibitively expensive and probably structurally impossible to redesign and reconstruct the home to fully meet the setback requirements. This unnecessary hardship to the Baders is, of course, exacerbated because they had no knowledge of this problem when they purchased the house. Under these circumstances, it would be terribly unfair and arbitrary to deny the Baders the minimal relief from Section 64416 that they are now requesting, and thus would create an unnecessary hardship for the owner while causing no detriment to the public. Related conditions. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions: to remove the partially constructed pool, to restore the functionality of the drainage easement, and to add an evergreen screen per the recommendation of the City of Milton arborist. This concludes the staff presentation.
Any questions to the staff from the board? Yes, sir.
Angela, on this type of zoning, this is AG1, is that correct?
Yes.
And are there other zoning districts that allow a building to be built closer than 25 foot to the side yard?
Yes.
Are there?
TR or CUP, which would have its own setback requirements, its own specific setback requirements.
So, so we do allow things to get closer than 25 foot?
Different zonings.
And are they as little as 10 foot or 15 foot in some of those cases?
Not sure. I'm sure there are some that are 10, there are some that are less than that.
And just out of curiosity, I know my plan doesn't quite show it, but is there any idea what the distance is between the two houses?
We didn't measure that, but there is a picture.
Yeah, I saw that.
That kind of shows, you know, the other two houses, and there's a stake in the middle of one of them.
I wasn't sure which house was which on that.
So on page 11, the Bader's house is the white one on the right, on that top picture.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's 14 feet, you figure the other yard is at least probably 25.
Okay. Thank you.
Angela, I have a question. Did we identify this when we went out to permit the pool or something? Is that how we identified that? Or how did the city identify that they were in there?
Yes, the pool was permitted, and so in the staff report, according to the permitting documents, everything looked fine. But when they started actually constructing the pool, the next-door neighbor noticed that it looked kind of funny and that it was really, really close to the property line, and she called the city.
Okay. Any other questions for? Yes, sir.
So is the pool actually part of this variance request?
No, the pool is going to be removed because it can't be fixed, basically.
Okay, and is it then, I'll hold that question for later.
Any other questions for staff? At this time, we'd like for the applicant to come forward and present. If you would, state your name and address, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Eric Fisher. I'm here on behalf of Lou and Kim Bader, who are both out of town on a business trip. I don't want to restate what Angela said is in our variance application, just to save everyone time. I think she summarized it pretty well, and I'm happy to answer any questions, any specific questions that you have. I can also address some of the questions that were raised to the staff as well.
Question? Yes, sir.
A question. Mr. Fisher, could you describe what, if any, discussions have taken place between either the property owners or yourself and the surveyor or the contractor that actually built the home?
Well, we have had multiple discussions with the surveyor. It's my understanding that the contractor that built it, which is Arden Homes, is out of business or nowhere to be found. But the surveyor was Grant Shepard. They did the survey, the original site plan, and that original site plan had the house where it was supposed to be built. For some reason, Arden Homes didn't follow that site plan, and that's not just for the Bader's house. It seems to be that there are other homes in the subdivision that were also not built exactly pursuant to Grant Shepard's original plans. The reason why that happened, no one knows, but it's so slight that no one has recognized it up until this point.
Would you go so far as to say there's no recourse at this point for the homeowners?
It doesn't seem like there's any possible recourse from an engineering perspective other than to tear down all the homes.
And from what we understand from staff, the neighbors were the ones that actually spotted this.
The neighbors, sorry to interrupt you.
And notified Mr. and Ms. Bader. I'm assuming that there's not a letter of support. Is that right, or what's the status of their discussions, neighbor to neighbor?
Just to clarify, the neighbors spotted, the Baders were building a pool, and the neighbors spotted that the pool seemed to be too close to the property line. The neighbors, who it's my understanding have lived in their house for 2 years, never spotted that a small portion of the south side of the house was slightly over the setback line, because it's still, even at its maximum point.
Just one quick point. I have in our notes that they purchased the home in May of 2010. Is that incorrect?
The Bader family did, correct.
Okay, so and the neighbors were there 2 years prior?
My understanding is that the neighbors were there from the beginning of the subdivision being built. So they never recognized, nor did anyone else in the subdivision recognize that this slight portion of the house was encroaching. It was the pool that was the problem. And I can give an update on the pool if you'd like, but we are in discussions currently with the neighbors. As far as I understand, I haven't spoken to them, but Mr. and Mrs. Bader have absolutely no problem with the house being slightly over the setback line, because there's a good chance that their house is as well, towards the other direction.
Are they, what's their posture, I guess, with respect to the removal of the pool? Are they aware that the pool's going to need to be removed, and are they okay with that? Because staff is recommending that we include that as a condition of the approval of the house variance. Is that, what's your take on that, or what is the Bader's take on that?
I've been in contact with Mr. Sanders of the City of Milton, keeping him abreast of our discussions both with the pool company and with the neighbors. Right now, we are currently speaking with the neighbors about doing a possible land swap, which would actually make this variance application moot, but we were dealing with time consideration, so we had to file it. And we should have resolution of whether or not we're going to be able to work out a land swap within the next week to 10 days. The neighbors, it's my understanding that they're consultants, and they're out of town basically every week, Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday. But either we're going to swap land so that the pool can stay in its current location and still be the proper distance from the property line, or we're going to remove the pool. And that should all be remedied hopefully by the end of the month.
By virtue of that logic, would you say that if we were to actually defer this case, that might be financially better for your client? Potentially?
In terms of the house variance, which is the only variance application that we filed, I don't think it will, unless there's a refund for the variance application, I don't think it will affect them one way or the other, unless the decision of the board is going to be to have the house torn down. As far as the pool being removed, if that is a strict condition, then it may be better off for everyone to defer it. If the condition is that the pool be removed or that a land swap take place, then I think that could probably make it so we don't have to shorten this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's, what do you want to do?
Any other questions for the applicant? Yes, sir.
And I just want to make sure, did I hear that you do or you do not have a letter from the adjoining neighbor saying they're okay with the house?
We do not have a letter from them, but
Okay.
my understanding is that Mr. and Mrs. Bader have spoken to them, told them about the house issue. Obviously, the focus of the conversation was the pool, but my understanding is that they have no problem with the house being slightly over the setback line.
Okay.
And this may be more for staff, but I want to understand the history of the pool. We had a plat, the house, and then we had a pool that was permitted based on that plat, and so if the house had been built in the proper position, the pool would be in the proper position, and everyone would be happy. Is that a true statement? That
Right.
the reason the pool's over is because of the house being over?
Right. The survey that was used for the pool permit was not an as-built survey, so no one was aware that the house was not built properly until the pool started construction.
Yes, sir.
Are they the first owners of this house, or are they the second owners?
It's my understanding that they are the first owners of this house. After it was built by Arden Homes, it went unsold for quite some time. I'm not sure at what point the real estate broker took over the house, but I don't think anyone has actually lived in the house other than the Bader family. It just sat there vacant.
And when they moved into the house, were they the ones who obtained a certificate of occupancy for that home? Or was it someone else finished the house and got a certificate of occupancy?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, we'd like to open the floor to public comment. Is there anybody that would like to make a comment? Hearing none, at this time, we give the applicant the opportunity to say anything else you'd like to say. Okay. Any questions for the staff? Yes, sir.
I have a question about the drainage easement. If they do this land swap and build a pool, are they going to be able to restore the drainage that's been disrupted by the pool construction? I assume that was looked at when we permitted it, but that was based on the pool being in a different place.
Well, currently, the pool is in the drainage easement, and we can't allow that, and that's not something you can get a variance for. So as it's shown now, the drainage easement would have to move, and I don't know the feasibility of that,
Okay, so
the contours of the property.
So if we condition the pool and the land swap, we need to include the drainage easement as part of that conditioning as well.
Either way, the pool has to be out of the drainage easement.
Right.
And is that drainage easement, is that a piped in that drainage easement, or is it just purely a ditch?
I believe it's a ditch or swale.
So in other words, if they did move it, it's not that difficult compared to what it would be from a cost standpoint of a pipe versus a swale or a ditch. So it's just a matter of moving it and getting a design done so that it accommodates all the drainage.
So it still
I'm making a
functions.
statement, I guess I should make it more as a question. If this was jeopardy of being in trouble, or maybe it's the other way around. But if they could move that if it was a ditch, is that correct?
They can, if everybody is willing to dig up their yards and, fix it,
Okay.
it can be moved.
All right.
I guess I want to understand why you're recommending that we include any conditioning on the pool if that's all covered under other regulations and permitting. Is that still something the staff wants to see in terms of conditions?
The land swap is a fairly new development. The last, when I was writing this, I I believe I was told that the next door neighbor, I thought that was off the table at that point. So, and the last time I talked to Mrs. Bader, she told me they were in negotiations with the pool company for an amount to have it removed. And, I just wanted to make sure it was resolved one way or the other.
I have a question for staff or the city attorney. If we put the language in of restoring the functionality of the drainage easement, does that address any concerns regarding the placement of the pool?
My concern with respect to identification of the pool issue, if the variance is granted with a condition that says you must remove the pool, whether or not they get a land swap in place, that condition will remain on the property no matter where the land is acquired, which would require them to come back in and amend the variance. With respect to the drainage easement, depending on how it's worded, if it's referring to the specific drainage easement, I think a wording such that the drainage easements on the property are in compliance with the city's ordinances would probably satisfy such that might imply removing the pool. It might imply moving the drainage easement. So
that, I was getting at, that's perhaps maybe an easier angle of providing for flexibility given the circumstances versus stipulating the removal of the pool.
Correct.
Okay.
So if we conditioned it to remove or relocate the pool to the satisfaction of the city ordinance.
Perhaps placement of the pool such that it's not...
It's in compliance.
Yeah.
Compliance
Yeah, in
with city
compliance.
ordinances and the drainage easement. So,
Yes, sir.
I'm changing the subject. There's also a condition by staff about adding shrubs or something to screen, and I don't quite understand if they've been living each other for 2 years like that, why it becomes an issue to do any kind of screening. I mean, I think that they're there, and I didn't see the...
It's the pool. It's for the adding of the pool.
Oh, for screening the pool?
Yes.
It's not, well, I guess I'm looking at this as being there for the house, I guess. I'm not thinking that it's screening for that whole common sideline, especially with that drainage easement there. It's going to be very hard to do.
Let's ask staff what their intent was.
Yeah, what was the intent, I guess? I was trying to understand. I'm sorry.
Well, the intent was for the house, because, again, at that time, I was assuming the pool was going away.
Right.
So, and again, the conditions are options. These are...
I understand. So I don't see the other adjoining homeowner here claiming that they need screening, and obviously they've lived next door to each other for 2+ years, and no one's opted for screening. I just feel it's kind of funny, but anyway, just thought I'd ask.
Any other questions?
Actually, I have one. What is
Yes.
a land? What is a land swap? What is that?
Go ahead.
Well, I guess
I'm new to the board. Sorry.
well, in this case, they perhaps give the homeowners in Lot 2 would give the Baders part of their property towards the back to extend their property line by the pool and the house, and then
Part
the
that the pool
Baders
encroaches into, in other words.
would,
Okay.
then they switch. The Baders
Not
would
really
give
a
them some of their
swap.
No, they would
property,
sell them the 10
so they
feet.
kind of
That's
just
zigzag the
called a
property
land
line.
swap.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
it's a land deal.
Land deal.
I told the one in the
Okay.
pool.
Any other questions for staff? This time, we'd like to close the public hearing. The floor is open for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay?
I move to defer petition number V10-011.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Just for discussion, and just to kind of get a sense of where we stand, I wrote down a few notes about why I think it might be a better idea to defer this one. Chiefly among those is that we don't have the neighbor standing here, and the neighbor's position has been interpreted through a third party, namely the applicant's attorney, which, not to throw your discretion or honesty into a question, but I think it would be better to hear straight from the horse's mouth where the two parties stand, and to hear the neighbor's thoughts. For one big reason, because that's a consideration for approval of the variance request, so that it causes no detriment to surrounding properties. We haven't heard that from the neighbor directly. Second, there is a pending land swap, the details of which are a little muddy. Third, I think, with these conditions that the attorney for the applicants has now seen, I think he could go back to his clients, and then they in turn could go to the contractor and look at potentially including some screening, potential redesign of the pool built around, what's already existing. There's ways that might be able to tweak it. Also, the issues with drainage, and finally, deferring this petition would have no negative impact on the resident. Ostensibly, we would be right back where we are now, and they're probably not going to be using that pool for several months because we're going into the winter season. But there is a potential negative impact on the neighbors and the community as a whole. I think we've established that. So that's my justification.
Well, and the only comment that I have about the neighbors not being here is that there's probably been a sign out there for a minimum of 30 or 45 days. So they've had plenty of opportunity to either contact us, send a letter for or against, and by them not being here, not saying anything, I would assume they're probably not against it, or they would have certainly sent a letter in or contacted Angela or somebody and said, I'm 100% against this, and we didn't hear that. So I would assume they're probably okay with the house the way it is. And they probably figured that the pool, they're all working on the pool, which is a separate issue, and that's probably why they're not here.
Just to play devil's advocate on that, the neighbor in question was the one that made the call to the city. So obviously they do have concerns about the pool
Correct.
itself. So,
but we're not here we're here just doing the house.
They did speak. Well, the house is a part of. The pool's part of the deal. Though. I mean,
Not really.
I agree.
Not really.
Well, the pool's what started it all.
Well,
There is some existing construction that's already there.
Right. So there's going to be.
They are kind of
precedent to keep
intertwined
the
now.
pool.
And if we were to approve it, we, presumably would include the condition of either moving forward with the construction of the pool or pulling it out. And so they are inextricably bound at this point, even though it's not one of the variance requests that we're hearing.
I agree. Let them settle it and then come back.
Well, the only thing I have is, again, with the pool, again, if they're going to leave the pool where it is, they're going to have to get a variance. You have to move the drainage easement. If they get the land swap, then we're not going to have to hear the issue again. I'm of the philosophy, we've got 5 cases today, or 4 cases. I'd say anything I can do to get off my plate now, I'd say do it. I don't see the people here. They're just going to spend more money on an attorney. I imagine you're an attorney. I'm either making you happy or making you sad for saying that. But the big thing is that, for us to just dispose of the case, and I understand what you're saying, but that's going to be up to the city to decide what goes on with the pool. Yes, they would probably like to get it addressed now, but they have every rights to say that pool's got to be moved. And whether we say it or not, they are not going to be able to get a CO for that pool. They will not be able to get that properly permitted, and they would have their permit suspended. And I guess I could even ask staff, have you suspended their building permit for the pool? So they don't even have rights to finish the pool right now. So they're stopped in essence, and I don't know how far they've gotten with it. I didn't look down to see, but I don't know if they put the plaster in there. But that's something they've got to just deal with. But again, I understand the staff's concerned possibly about that, but I'm here to hear this variance. The variance is really about the house. For me to hold it up, I just don't see a lot of big reasons for it. But again, it's up to the board. But I understand why you're saying that by all means. But I don't think they're going to go very far with that pool unless they get something worked out. And
any other discussion?
And I don't want to also put a cost, because once we say it's got to be moved, you're pretty much playing into the next door neighbor's hands to make sure they give an increased price on that cost of that land to get it moved.
which I would argue is an argument for deferral, because, at that point, if basically leverage the applicant in such a way that they are behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, let them work it out.
Any other discussion? Okay, there's a motion on the floor to defer V10-11. All in favor of deferral, raise your right hand. All opposed, raise your right hand. It passed 4-3 to defer.
Until, just for the record.
And
Are you able to announce it for next month? Or are we past the point of no return?
I can, yes.
Okay. 30 days?
30 days enough?
For the November meeting.
I certainly hope 30 days is enough. And just to address the point about the neighbors, as I said, it's my understanding that both of the neighbors are consultants, so the chances of them being able to come to hearing on a weekday evening are slim to none.
A letter's just as...
Yeah, and I put that in my notes.
Next door neighbor letter in particular.
Yes.
But can you get all this done in 30 days, or do you need 60?
I think that 60 would probably be preferable, but we can try for 30.
I mean, we can.
I'd like to get it resolved as soon as possible.
Could we state 30 and then he could request a deferral of additional 30 days without having to appear?
You'd have to make another motion, you have to come back. Well, staff can defer it administratively, so, yeah.
Let's do that route. Just leave it as it stands, and you can.
That gives you the option.
If you need additional 30 days, make sure you contact staff with ample time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Our next case is V10-012 to allow a half basketball recreation court and play set to be located less than 100 feet from the adjoining property line. Angela, will you please present?
Petition number V10-012. Address is 3100 Genesis Way. Requested variance is to allow a half basketball recreation court and play set to be located less than 100 feet from the adjoining property line. The site, 1300 Genesis Way, is the central common area of the Centennial Village subdivision. The property consists of .38 acres and is located in the Highway 9 overlay. It is zoned TR, which is Townhome Residential, per 2006 Z0023. Mr. Russell Hayes, the Centennial Village Homeowners Association president, states that during the Fulton County rezoning process in 2006, it was agreed between Habitat for Humanity and the Bethany Area Neighborhood Association that there would be no homes built in the center island of the subdivision and that area would be used for a playground. No specific playground plan was developed at that time. The HOA has since developed plans for the playground area and has secured donors for materials and volunteers to perform the construction work. The central common area is roughly 183 feet by 135 feet wide, curb to curb. It is surrounded by a 50-foot right-of-way, Genesis Way, and fee simple townhomes. The HOA plans to construct a half basketball court with a hoop and a wooden play structure on one half of the common area. The other half will be sodded and remain open. Section 64-1602B-3B states that recreational courts, accessory structures, fencing, and parking shall be located a minimum of 100 feet from all adjoining property lines. Because of the limited size of this common area, a variance is required. A courtesy review was performed by the City of Milton Design Review Board on October 5, 2010. The board offered the following comments. Approve the design as is, don't flip-flop. Consider adding a fence at swing area and security lighting. This will be a nice addition to the neighborhood. The The staff held a focus meeting on October 6, 2010, at which the following comments were provided. Building plan review and site plan review had no issues. The arborist stated no issues with the request. Landscaping shall be provided as shown unless other arrangements are made with the city arborist, and the DOT had no issues. Standards for consideration. The approval of a variance is based on the following considerations. Relief, if granted, would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance. There are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of the property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. Relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured, and that substantial justice is done. The applicant addresses these considerations as follows. Approval of the requested variance would not offend the spirit or intent of the zoning ordinance because the court in place set would create more desirable living conditions for the homeowners, provide a safe place for their children to play, and is an appropriate use of the land. There is no other common area at Centennial Village that is suitable for a recreation or play area. Recommended conditions. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. Install a split rail or horse fence to the perimeter of the common area, and landscaping shall be provided as shown on the site plan dated 9/7/10, unless other arrangements are made with the city arborist. This concludes the staff presentation.
Any questions from the board to the staff? Yes, sir.
One of the recommended conditions is installing a split rail horse fence to the perimeter of the common area. Does that mean around the entire perimeter?
Of course, that can get modified.
And is to be consistent with the overlay, is that recommended to be a four-board, split rail, black?
Painted black, something similar to what's around Highway 9 now.
Surrounding it, right, all right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Back to the fence again. Does it have to be a four-board? I mean, when I hear split rail, I normally think of a three-rail, split rail fence. I don't think of a four-board fence. And then also, typically when I think of a playground type of thing, I normally think of either chicken wire or something on the inside to keep things straying. But again, it doesn't matter to me. But would chicken wire or hog wire or something like that on the interior be okay in case they wanted to close a gate and actually allow dogs to roam in that area? Would that be?
Well, staff wouldn't have objections to that.
So the three-rail versus the four-board?
Something wood and similar to what's out there now. Of course, they can't use chain link is prohibited, that sort of thing. So just
Right.
consistent with what's out there, what's
Okay.
around Highway 9 now.
Right. Because I'm just scared that you start making it so high that parents can't see over the top of the fence to see if their children are there. They're getting blocked by boards, and I'm thinking by keeping it a little bit shorter, you can see over it a little bit better.
Right, I wouldn't imagine it would be too tall. I was just trying to protect, keep
Right.
kids from running out into the street after a ball or.
Right. And then, as my nephew just did, he broke his arm climbing over a fence that was 5 foot and falling. And if I keep it shorter, there's less likelihood of that to occur because children will climb and children will fall. So
That's what they do.
that's correct. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for staff. On the south side of this subdivision, were there townhomes on that side too? I don't see any in the
I believe so.
topography. So this area is completely surrounded by the townhomes.
I'm sorry?
Is there any way that you can talk closer to your microphone so we'll hear what you move it over closer and see if that helps. So this play area is completely surrounded by the townhomes in this subdivision?
In the subdivision, there's a circle, right?
It looked like that when I drove through it, but then on this map, it looked different. Okay.
Any other questions for staff? This time, we'd like to call the applicant forward to please present. If you would state your name and address, we would certainly appreciate it.
My name is David McLaughlin. I'm with the local affiliate of Habitat, and I'm representing Habitat as well as the Homeowners Association. Thank you for hearing us tonight. My plan was to go over the plan. I'm not sure how much you all want to hear about the plan, of what is where on it, what the different areas are. First of all, it is a circle that comes off of Highway 9 that's completely enclosed. It's all one enclosed subdivision with no other subdivisions attached. The right-hand side, the plan, first off, was brought about by a year to 2 years' worth of negotiations between Habitat and Stone Creek Church. We got the homeowners involved to find out what all was wanted. And their desires were to have a large open area, like you see right here, have a couple areas other than that large open area that would allow the children of the diverse ages to be able to play. And so we have a small playset area up in this area here, and then a half recreational court that would be able to allow everything from, it's not only for basketball, you can play hopscotch, whatever, it's just a nice flat concrete area that would allow them to play out there. From the comments that we heard when we were going through this whole process is that lighting, they didn't really want lights out there. If that comes up, we had a DRB person talk about putting a security light out there, and that was, they didn't want lights out there because of the security problem, because there are night lights out here, street lights. There are 3 street lights that keep enough light out there so they can tell that people are using it, like if other kids come in from the neighborhoods. But they didn't want lights out there that would allow them to come in at night and play. As far as the fence goes, what I heard at the DRB is they wanted a fence around the play set area. I may have been mistaken. I didn't want it around the whole area. And that would kind of not fit in with the neighborhood. There's no other split rail fence. There's nothing like that out there at all. It's open space. And as far as providing security, you would actually a split rail fence for the kids that are out there. It might be a danger more than it would be a help, and it would be a maintenance nightmare. Kids trying to climb on the split rail fence, those kinds of things. So I would try and get an input of not having to put the fence in there, really. The protection that is provided out there from the street, it's a pretty well-controlled neighborhood. There are 21 townhomes out there. It's a very tight neighborhood. We have several representatives here tonight. We had a meeting on the plan, I don't know, about a month ago or somewhere in there, that everyone that showed up for it, 25 of the 21 townhomes, including the last 4 that are being built, showed up and signed the petition or letter that you all received. And the only reason the other 4 didn't show up is that they just weren't there to come. It was Saturday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. So there's a strong homeowners association. They are strongly supporting the play area, and that's what it was intended to be from the very beginning, is that, and we feel that this provides a diverse area and a safe area for the kids to play in.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
On the fence issue, you're saying that if you were going to put any kind of fence, you would put it around the swing set area or the playground equipment? Is that correct?
I would prefer not to put a fence at all out there. I don't personally think a fence is necessary. There's quite a bit. This whole thing is a very large area. It looks maybe small to y'all, but it's a decent-sized play area. And the parents are out there monitoring the kids. It's an enclosed subdivision. and it's not like driving down one straight road, high speed. It's a very tight little circle. So I would go with, if you could, not put on the fence at all, but a split rail fence to me would be kind of a one that kids are going to want to climb on and break and those kinds of things.
I built probably about 20 playgrounds over the years, and the benefit of fencing, in particular the playground areas, you do have a controlled environment where you have one way in and typically have one way out. What that does is that keeps the children who might be running around there from all of a sudden interjecting into a path of a swinging child on a swing. You're able to control things, and people aren't running as much, and that's typically why I've seen, and for most parts, I've always fenced my playground area, or at least somehow enclosed it to make it a very controlled environment, that I want everybody to be, how should I say it, not schoolroom walking, but more or less being very concerned about how fast they're walking. I kind of agree with you. I'm not real clear on why everything was being asked to be fenced, but I could see very strongly why the playground area could. But that's provided that the fence be outside the swing area. There's a certain code that when you do build a swing that you've got to be so many feet away from the swing under, I know it's not OSHA, but it's kind of like an OSHA standard for distance for swinging. And I want to say it's almost like it's godly about it. It's like 20 some odd feet or more. And I don't remember the exact dimensions, but I just want to make sure that whatever you do, and I know there was a picture in here too that it, unless you put the proper amount of mulch underneath the swing set too, you're also a violation of the standards. That it's got to have a certain thickness of mulch so that children don't get injured. And then lastly, I built sports courts. That's what I used to call them, was sports courts. I didn't always call them basketball courts, but I kind of agree. If you light it, I assure you, you're going to get a different kind of element coming out there at different times than you would perhaps during the day. And I'm not saying that the daylight doesn't stay late in the summer, but you will experience a little bit difference. And but that's something you need to be aware of, because I did have problems in some of my basketball courts. So I had to be very careful about thinking, do I really want to add any more of those?
Any other questions for the applicant?
On the fence topic, what would your association feel of a wrought iron type fence in lieu of a split rail fence? For two purposes. One is to address the concern about climbing. Wrought iron would be much more difficult, if not impossible, to climb. And two, to address the topics of controlling children, spillover of balls into the streets, etc.
You mean chain link?
No.
Wrought iron?
Yeah.
Wrought iron would be very expensive for us. I'm not sure we would get the support for that. Chain link, I've heard that it's not allowed in the Highway 9 area, but it's what we have around our detention ponds. So with approved for that, I'm not sure what the difference is between that and this right here, but that's just one minor point.
Okay.
So quick, I actually I ran by here today. We did a recon. And the thing that I noticed, and I'm all about community involvement, people getting together. I live in Avonsong right up the street, and I've been there about 3.5 years. And the time that I've been there, I don't know that a basketball rim has survived longer than about a month. And it's really unfortunate, because I think the intent here is to get kids out, get them active, let neighbors hang out with one another, which I think is admirable. But I would second Walt's statement that this could have an unintended consequence of drawing people from outside the community, the direct community. There's noise considerations, potentially, God forbid, crime, and given the fact that adults might be out there adjacent to kids with no barrier in between and no card system, which is what we have in order to get into the pool area, at least in my neighborhood. I think that as an HOA, I would strongly recommend taking a really hard look at it. But again, I say that just as a neighbor, and don't take that the wrong way. I hope that this works out for the best. But it is, potential for a change in the neighborhood from what you have now, which is, a pretty quiet neighborhood. This is going to draw a lot of people, and there's things that go along with that.
We currently have the kids with the temporary, hoops back on the parking areas in front of the garages. So there's already basketball activity, and the kids are out there playing. So we don't really expect the noise to change from a noise level, if that's a concern.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is because in our standards of consideration, we have to consider whether the public good is done.
Right.
So it's not just, is the neighborhood happy? We have to expand that out and say, okay, is this consistent with the neighborhood, and holistically, is this a good idea? So that's why I asked.
Any other questions for the board?
One other, I did build basketball courts. They did survive many years, but I did learn from the 2 or 3 I did build, I did not go with inferior quality material on post or backboard or rim, and they did survive. So
Notice you got a glass backboard. That's nice.
So you've got to go high, I should say, strong to make it last. But I kind of agree with you. No lighting at all, because I think you create problems in the long run. But as far as I don't care if I had a gate with a key or not. If undesirables wanted to get in, they could, and they did. And other people would let them in or whatever. So up to a certain point, the community has to do its own job of policing, and that depends on the community. The ones that I felt that did the best job, things lasted longer. The ones that did a poor job, well, it didn't last very long. So it's up to the community.
It's my understanding that the community's already talked about the potential for that, and that they're ready to handle those kind of situations.
And with the ambient light that you mentioned might actually cover the court. Potentially in the summer months, you could have people out there 11, 12 o'clock at night playing basketball, and there's no way to say, okay, now it's time to leave. I mean, if it's basically unfettered access to the court, second and third order effects is what I'm trying to get at. Do you retain any private security at the moment for the neighborhood?
You talking about like a gate or anything like that? No, there's no security out there other than the homeowners. There are enough security.
Right.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. This time we'd like to open the floor for public comment. Please come forward one at a time, if there is any. You give that to Angela. And if you would, state your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Soila Franklin, and I live at 3160 Genesis Way. I'm a mother of 6 children, and the basketball court will really do us good. The kids are already playing on the street. They have to move to the side when vehicles coming through, and it's mostly boys there, so they have some time to do something with. As you come from school, homework, and then they can go outside and do recreation. But not having that park there we rather have the park for the kids. It would really help us. I'm a parent, and when it's time, said it's 9 o'clock curfew, I'm out there. It's time to get in. I look over them. I even look when they throw the trash. They're in the open part for the park without lights. While we wait impatiently for the park to build, that will be light up. But yes, I get to the kids then and let them know it's time to go inside. Like, hey, 9 o'clock, school in the morning. So I am one of the parents also that go out there after them. So I can see where it's useful for the park, for the kids. Because on the street, they will kick their ball, will hit someone, cars, hit someone's house, and maybe neighbors complain. So the park will do us good for everyone out there. It's a Habitat is helping family with children, and being with them in the house will do no good.
Thank you.
I've got a question. Do you think a sign would help also, saying that the courts are closed at a certain hour? Would that maybe help, perhaps? And that way you're not always being put as the bad person that, well, we all as a community agreed this is a time that the courts are closed or something like that. I'm just brainstorming and, trying to get a consensus perhaps. And
that would be good also, and also as homeowners, as we have meeting, the parents, they come and we also let them know, hey, it's 10:30 curfew, your child should be inside. They come and get their children once they're out there. Kids not going to come in on their own. So you, the parents, have to come and tell them mostly. But yes, the sign would also reinforce it.
I understand.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting.
Any other public comment? At this time, the applicant has the opportunity to make a closing statement, or if you have anything else to say.
The way that we're able to build the area that we've got out there is through donations. We can't do it. So some of the costs that I'm hearing with the fence all the way around, or wrought iron, those kinds of very expensive things, I don't know if we would need to withdraw, our petition to put in the court or what. But I would just like to impress that we're getting large donations, free concrete, those kinds of things that allow us to do this. So I guess that would be my only request of y'all. Just please keep in mind that any costs that are thrown out there are coming from very generous donors, and if you could just please keep that in mind. Yeah, that's what I said. The basketball court is being donated. The goal. Oh, the heavy duty. Yeah, that's what I said. It was a plexiglass, heavy duty plexiglass.
Great.
Court, ma'am.
Any questions to staff from the board?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
I want to get back to the core of the variance here. The variance is the 100 feet, and are any of the perimeter of the play area, is that within 100 feet of any property owner other than the people that live in this subdivision?
No.
Okay, so the 100 feet is just for the subdivision tenants. It's just the homeowners.
Looks like it does apply to every tenant in the subdivision.
It does, but as I understand it, we've gotten a petition from every one that says they're in favor of it, so. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? This time, we'd like to close the public hearing. At this time, I'd like to open the floor for a motion. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion for approval of V10-012. This is to allow a half basketball/recreation court and play set to be located less than 100 feet from the adjoining property lines. Basically, I feel that the relief if granted will not offend the spirit or the intent of the ordinance, that there is some extraordinary and exceptional situations on this property because it is located in the center island. I think it was always intended to be some type of playground area. The relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties, and that the public safety, health, and welfare will be secure and substantial justice will be done. The only thing that I'm going to ask is that they conform to the landscape and site plan as provided dated 9/7/10, and unless arrangements are made with the city arborist, and I am not going to make the recommendation on the fence at this time. I'm just going to say that I think it's going to be up to the homeowners to make that situation known. If they can get the donations, that's great, but I understand working for private firms with charity and such, so it's sometimes hard to get. But I believe that would be the best in this situation, and pray they do the right thing with the sign and the fence. And I wish them a lot of luck and congratulate them that they've gotten this far. So I thank them.
Second, from Scott Kilgore. Discussion?
Mr. Chair, could I ask staff a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess maybe for the attorney, is there anything of a statutory nature that would require this to be fenced? You know, recreational areas must have fencing or lighting.
I'm not aware of it to the extent that I haven't reviewed that issue in depth. I'm not aware of a specific requirement that any privately owned property have a fencing around recreational areas. I mean, and to the extent it is there, this would not be a variance from that requirement.
Question for staff. Has this already been permitted? Or is that waiting on the variance? And part of the permitting process would review the ordinance for any of those types of requirements, would it not?
Right.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Yes, sir.
Just point of discussion, and it's around the signage topic that you had brought up earlier, Walt. Now I was curious why you didn't add that as a condition.
I think it's, if I said put up a sign and make it a certain time, I'm not part of the community. I think that's something the community's got to decide. If they want a sign, they need to be the one to enforce the sign. It's the old theory. You could put out a sign, but it doesn't mean anything unless there's somebody out there willing to enforce it. I think by me saying that the sign has to go up, I'm putting an obligation on them, and I think they need to be the ones who take on that obligation, not me enforcing it on them. I guess I'm of the belief that it's your community, you decide, but that would be my recommendation. But I think they'll see the wisdom perhaps in that, where I did that in a number of places, and it did help. And I'm not going to say it always cured the people, because some people claim they can't read, and then some people don't want to read. So, but I didn't want to put that obligation on the community. I just felt like you have a good group, and hopefully you can come up with something, and you may have a number of rules that may be beyond just how late you stay open and other things, but you may have no glass containers allowed in the park for somebody getting cut. You may have 20 different things on the sign, but I think that's something for you all to decide.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I would agree with that with Mr. Reedcock. I feel like when we grant a variance, we attach conditions in order to have that variance be more in the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Or the reason for conditions is to try to keep, because we're granting a variance to the ordinance, we want to try to keep it as close to the ordinance as we can. I don't see how the fence or the sign or any of that really has anything to do with a 100-foot distance to the nearest property owner when all the property owners have said they're in favor of this. To me, I think any of those types of conditions almost become us kind of telling them how to run their playground.
I would disagree. Actually, I was going to make the opposite point, that I'm okay. I feel like we've satisfied each condition except for the first part of the clause of the fourth condition, namely that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured.
But it should always be within the context of the variance that's being requested. The variance that's being requested is to be closer than 100 feet to the nearest property owner. That's what we're being asked as a board, to vary from the ordinance.
Right.
And so if we allow that variance, is health and welfare secured? Well, with respect to the variance, yes. They may decide to put a well right in the middle of this thing, but that has nothing to do with the variance. That may be a very bad idea, and I think the city staff might have something to say about that, because there may be other ordinances that are being varied by such a proposal. But
The nature of what's being considered, though, is a basketball recreation court, and so I think we have to consider it within the context of that specific request. So, yeah, I mean, got it that we're talking about, feet as it pertains to the property line, but, it is, I think we always have considered the object that's being placed, like, for example, with backyard fireplaces, there's smoke, or backyard basketball court, there's noise. And, granted, it might be a side yard or rear yard setback, but there's other considerations pertaining to the specific bit of construction that's going to take place. So I would argue that I don't think it's an unreasonable condition, and you could put it in very generic terms, i.e., HOA will place signage detailing the list of rules pertaining to this area, and leave it completely up to their discretion. I can't see that costing more than $150 or so.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
On this topic, understanding the concern about fencing, I had thought about, okay, could we do some sort of natural fencing, shrubbery, and I dismissed that in my own mind because that provides for a screening that if a child should dart through that, that could cause unintended consequences. So I think the signage point is being debated here is really to point number 4 in our variance considerations. If we can address this being for resident use, right? It's the residents that are requesting this, so if we put it in my own pool as a restriction for right at the entranceway for residents and their guests only. So something as simple and as generic as that allows for an enforcement mechanism for the HOA and for our own public safety. So I would like to offer an amendment to the amendment or to the motion at hand that this be for resident and guest use only. Signage be added.
Second.
Discussion on the friendly amendment.
And I don't think it's, again, an unreasonable consideration, namely because we're not infringing on the HOA's right of self-determination, but we are ensuring that public safety, because this is a broader issue than just people that live within that community. We have to consider the public safety people of Milton. There's a lot of people that live within that particular corridor.
I would also offer, as part of discussion, that this provides for a very visible reminder that this is a common area, and therefore folks who are not there that are there that shouldn't be there are trespassing is one mechanism of alerting to that fact for loitering or whatever. I think it's a pretty simple, generic mechanism.
I think they have such a tight community that they're going to be a tight community and take care of the whole area than us telling them what they need to do with it. It sounds like, they're watching the kids, they're taking care of it, and for us to, ask them to do the different things, I
would
think...
ask them to do one thing.
Okay.
Just one thing.
Okay.
Place a resident and guest use sign only. That's my point. In lieu of other safety precautions for public safety around fencing, which understanding the financial hardship there.
Yeah.
And again, public safety being the inherent clause there, not resident safety, and that's obviously a standard for consideration.
Any other discussions about the friendly amendment? Okay, at this time, let's take a vote on the friendly amendment, which states that the homeowners association place a sign that reads resident and guest use only. All in favor, please raise your right hand. All opposed? Let it be known that it passed 4-3. Any other discussion on the original motion?
Mr. Chairman, before you go to that, I just wanted to clarify an earlier question Mr. McCray asked regarding the requirement for fencing. Section 64-1092 makes an allowance For placement of fencings, but does not require it. It says chain link fencing may be used along other recreational areas. That's a reference, so it is not required.
Thank you.
Council, when I make this motion, do I add the friendly amendment into the motion now?
Yes, you would.
Okay. The motion on the board is to approve V10-012 to allow a half basketball/recreation court and play set to be located less than 100 feet from the adjoining property line, as it follows the 4 variance guidelines, and I won't reread them again because they've already been stated tonight, and to conform to the landscape design dated 9/7/10 with the attachment of the friendly amendment, which will require them to post a sign that will read resident and guest use only. All in favor, please raise your right hand. All opposed, let it be known that it passed 7-0. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you for being residents of Milton.
Thank you.
Say no, they're going to kick me out if I try to get
That's exactly right. You'll never get it.
Breaking up the scenery.
Yeah.
I just think we're going to be using one of these.
You'll never get it. At this time, we'd like to present V10-014, and the requested variance is to appeal a decision of the Design Review Board, denial of certificate of endorsement for vinyl weather curtains. Angela, will you please present?
Petition number V10-014. Address is 12650 Crabapple Road. Requested variance is the appeal of a decision of the Design Review Board, denial of certificate of endorsement for vinyl weather curtains. The site, the Old Blind Dog Irish Pub, is a restaurant located at 12650 Crabapple Road in the Crabapple Mercantile Commercial Development. The property is zoned MIX, which is mixed use, per 2005 Z0070, and is located in the Crabapple Crossroads overlay. The building has a 6,000 square foot footprint, not including the outside patio. On September 7, 2010, Dennis Fila went before the City of Milton Design Review Board and presented his plan to install vinyl weather curtains on the covered patio outside of the Old Blind Dog Pub. The DRB refused to grant a certificate of endorsement for the proposal. They were concerned about long-term upkeep of the vinyl curtains. The board also indicated that they had denied proposals for similar curtains at 2 other locations. Mr. Fila brings this petition before the Board of Zoning Appeals to appeal the decision of the DRB. The BZA may take the following actions pursuant to a secondary variance and/or interpretation appeal. Number 1, affirm an order, requirement, or decision, wholly or partly. Number 2, reverse an order, requirement, or decision, wholly or partly. Number 3, clarify, present an interpretation of the text in the form of a statement or clarification. Additional department comments. The staff held a focus meeting on October 6, 2010, in which the following comments were provided. Building plan review, no issues with roll-up vinyl. Frame panels would alter the use classification and the space would be considered heated. The building was originally built to the maximum allowable square footage. Site plan review, arborist and DOT, no issues. Standards for consideration. The approval of a variance is based on the following considerations. Relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance. There are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. Relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. That the public safety, health, and welfare are secured, and that substantial justice is done. The applicant responded to the considerations as follows. Because the patio structure already exists, there is no detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. The patio is existing and will continue to be used after the proposed changes are made. The only difference will be the ability of the public to enjoy outdoor dining 12 months of the year. There are no issues with public safety. All the material that will be used in the weatherproofing of the patio area are of the highest quality and are fire rated for safety. Old Blind Dog competes with many other businesses in the area, and some of them have all-weather patios. To allow other restaurants to operate with unapproved structures while denying the applicant the opportunity to construct a superior, eye-pleasing dining environment would result in a substantial injustice.
Any questions from the board to the staff? Yes, sir.
For our attorney, just if you could go in in some depth about our ability to overturn the design review board's findings. I believe this is a first, at least for me, on the board, where we've heard a petition that has already been reviewed by DRB and been turned down. If we could just kind of get into the ramifications if we do overturn. Does this constitute a variance?
And this has been presented, and I don't see the actual application. I'm reviewing the petition package as an appeal of the decision, in which case the board is, this board is charged with reviewing whether or not the decision is correct. An appeal is not a request to vary the application of the ordinance. An appeal is just whether or not the decision, the underlying decision was correct.
If the DRB was appropriate in their decision.
They interpreted the ordinance correctly, such that the proposal was not consistent with the ordinance. There is a procedure whereby someone who must appear before the design review board can apply for a hardship exception, which would, in essence, have the same application as in essence, a variance. And that is Section 641023. And this Board of Zoning Appeals would be able to hear that consideration.
However, the sole determination that we're making tonight is whether or not the DRB acted appropriately in turning down the applicant. And the reason I ask is because they're on page 5 of our packet, the standards of consideration for variance requests are listed, and that's what's throwing me, because this didn't appear to be a variance request. It was just a...
Well, and I'm looking at the paperwork in the package. I see a reference to this variance application seeks to overturn a decision. That's somewhat mixing the two processes. I don't have, and I don't know if that's the original application or not.
And in fact, the applicant's letter requesting, I mean, it's phrased in such a way that they say, the surrounding property, there's no detriment. It's phrased in such a way.
I agree. It appears that the argument in reference in support of the application makes it appear to be a request for a variance.
Right. Okay.
Hang on one moment. Mr. Chairman, to save everybody some time,
get maybe a 5-10 minute
Do we need to do a motion?
continuance.
Or can we just state it?
Yeah,
we'll
you
just
just
move to
call them.
Let's just adjourn, move to adjourn for 10 minutes.
Second.
We recall the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting back to order. Counselor?
As we have discussed, there's a difference in the board's approach to whether this is an exception pursuant to 641023 or whether it is an appeal of the DRB's decision pursuant to the board's general, this board's general authority. The paperwork which we have makes reference to both a variance and an appeal. I would be hesitant to rule either way and ask somehow we get clarification either whether the applicant is proceeding under the exception procedures or under the appeal procedures. And depending on that situation, we need to address it according to their intentions. I would, depending on what we have, it appears the matter has been addressed as an exception, although it appears they've been using the variance requirements as opposed to the exceptions to the DRB considerations. So it may be one that needs to be clarified by virtue of a deferral. Perhaps hearing from the applicant may provide us with more clarification.
I don't understand. Are you saying you can't tell me whether we're hearing this as an
appeal or an exception?
Appeal or a variance? I guess I'm trying to understand what criteria we use. When you say appeal, I guess I don't understand what the difference is between appeal and the variance standards.
The appeal, to the extent this is considered as an appeal of the Design Review Board's decision, this board's authority is to consider whether or not the Design Review Board properly applied the city's ordinance. It's not to consider changes from the ordinance, just whether or not the Design Review Board applied the ordinance. If this is, there is also a provision pursuant to the city's ordinance which provides for exceptions to when a Design Review Board certificate of endorsement, which is what I understand was the subject of the Design Review Board decision, would be required. That would go before this board because, out of an abundance of caution, because there are references to variances in the application, and because the arguments and statements in support of the application suggest the variance procedures, I would prefer not to go forward as if it is an appeal which, because a decision has been made by the Design Review Board, it appears to be an appeal.
Do we have anyone here from the board, from the Design Review Board?
No. Staff support only.
Okay, so was one of the staff members there at the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Councilor, in 641018, where it gives the guidelines and the criteria for the issuance of a certificate of endorsement, it says that that issuance is based on the criteria of the zoning ordinance, along with other criteria, blah, blah, blah. What ordinance was it based on that they denied it? And I think for us to even hear this, we have to know what their criteria was in denying this. In 1022, it says, a proposed material change in the appearance of a project has to be consistent with the overlay district provisions. Again, was there any, and for those of you that are representing the DRB here, do we have a transcript, or do we know what they gave as their criteria for denial? Because that's what, if we're going to hear an appeal on this, we have to know what their criteria was so we know whether their criteria was sound or not.
There's nothing specific in the zoning ordinance prohibiting vinyl weather curtains. It's just not addressed either way.
Okay.
The DRB has some leeway in interpreting the ordinance, and that they look at the aesthetics of a project.
Okay.
So they thought that that was within their purview. The DRB looks at any building permit, and that was the component of the building permit that they felt they couldn't support.
Is there any verbiage in the ordinance that hints at the aesthetics being objectionable?
It's not mentioned at all.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
On that same point, are there any provisions within the district overlay, the Crab Apple District overlay, that would apply?
No.
Okay.
I also noticed that there's quite a bit of material in MSDS sheets in here, but the actual composition of materials that are to be used in regards to the fire safety.
Wow.
So I wonder if the DRB's concern was with fire safety, and that's why the applicants intended to address that.
They didn't mention fire safety.
Okay.
And I actually have the, I guess, sample folder of the material that they want to use. It's the .019 clear, and I'll pass that along.
Councilor, would it be a good idea for us to let the applicant speak at this time? Maybe he can...
I've got one more question on it, just
Go
real
ahead.
quickly.
Go ahead.
On the square footage and heating area is also somehow mentioned in this article, and I guess I don't understand how heating and not being a heated area, how does that make a difference, I guess, and is the standards for an area that's heated considered different than an area that's perhaps seasonally heated versus permanently heated, or just trying to...
For this particular site, there is a maximum square footage that's allowed per acre, and that's a heated square footage. And therefore, if these were permanent fixtures, this would create additional heated square footage, which would go towards that maximum. And therefore, they would be over that condition of zoning. So that's why we were trying to be very careful to make sure that this was a temporary structure only, so that we didn't have to consider it a permanently heated square footage.
Is it considered a heated square footage because they're going to put heating air out there?
There are heaters out there currently. There's no air, ceiling fans only, but so there's no conditioned air, but there are heaters out there.
By enclosing it
But by
with
enclosing
heaters, that
it
makes it heated square
permanently,
feet.
yes.
And is that another variance that they then have to seek?
They'd have to actually get a change to the conditions of zoning.
But I know, like in my community that I work at, we talk about heaters that are portable versus heaters that are permanent in a different sense. Are these
Right, these are permanently installed gas heaters.
permanently installed? So in other
So
words...
they're installed in the ceiling.
And the plan that's in front of us is for temporary.
Yes, sir, these are for temporary.
This is not a permanent.
curtains. Yes, sir, they'll come in and out. And in fact, let me walk you through how we got here, so maybe that will help clarify this appeals process. And when it came to us as a building permit, frankly, what you see typically out there for weather curtains, no one has ever requested a permit because they've simply stapled the curtain, for lack of a, for a more eloquent response, stapled the curtains to the framing that exists. In this particular case, the intent was to create new framing panels so that they could put those in and out and have a kind of a nicer look, and then also to change the doorway so that they could accommodate ADA accessibility as well as other requirements. Because it's currently just got a gate now that's an open wrought iron gate, so they could continue to keep that heat in. So if they didn't need to do the framing, you would probably not be sitting here today. But because they had to do the framing, they have to get a building permit. And in order to get the building permit, they had to go before the DRB. And that's where the DRB had their discussion, made their recommendations. based on the overlay ordinance, appeals of the DRB decisions go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. They would typically require a certificate of endorsement before they get a permit. Those are enforced by my office, by me directly. Appeals of my decisions come as secondary variances to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So this is how we got before the Board of Zoning Appeals. One way or the other way, we felt like it was appropriate to bring it back to you all. Again, there's not a very clear criteria for you to necessarily hear this, simply because it's so unusual, and the two ordinances, the overlay district ordinances and the powers and duties ordinance, don't really mesh very well, and there's just no way else to say that. That's how we got here. So I hope that helps clarify just a little bit.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
So just to clarify again, the determination that we're making here tonight is an endorsement of the design that's shown here, or is it a variance request, or is it a finding of whether or not the DRB acted appropriately?
The way it stands, if it's to go forward, the board needs to treat this as an appeal of the Design Review Board's decision. In so doing, to decide whether the Design Review Board was authorized to deny a certificate of endorsement for this particular project.
So if we find in favor of the applicant, that would then trigger their ability to go forward with their permitting and installation process?
Yes.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, where would the COE come from? You, or would the DRB have to issue it?
It's technically issued by the DRB and then enforced by my department. None of the permits go out without approval.
So that would be unprecedented for them as well. They would have to basically reverse their decision and issue it despite a vote against.
Because you have
because we've
reversed their decision.
We've reversed their decision.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
So if we're viewing this as an appeal, we are not viewing it under the considerations for a variance?
That's correct.
And viewing it as an appeal, we do not have any flexibility or leniency in making any conditions or changes to the plans.
I think only to the extent that, I'm not saying none, but only if it was required by the ordinance. Like if your decision changed their denial, but there were other requirements that you would have to make sure were included in it now that it has been approved, if there were other, you're not granting anything more than the ordinance would allow.
Okay. So just to make sure I'm crystal clear on this, it's stated in our packet here that we have the option of number one, affirming the order requirement or decision wholly or partly. 2, we could reverse an order requirement or decision wholly or partly. Or 3, we can clarify, in which case we present an interpretation of the text in the form of a statement of clarification. Those are our 3 options here under appeal. And I'm on page 3.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes. The clarification gives you, it's not to impose conditions that are unrelated to this, or it's just to, again, clarify that now that you have perhaps approved something, that does not mean that you can do things that are opposed to the ordinance as it stands.
Understand. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Once again, we had varying text, however. In 64-1023, Part B, it says, in granting such exceptions, the Board of Zoning Appeals may impose such reasonable and additional stipulations and conditions as will, in its judgment, best fulfill the purpose of this article.
Right. That's why I tried to identify we're going down a separate avenue, the appeal avenue, as opposed to the exception. Because the decision has already been rendered, this would be separate and apart from a Design Review Board decision.
Okay.
Counselor, I have one question. I would assume that the applicant probably is as confused as we are about how he was supposed to either go for an appeal or go for a variance. Would it be prudent of the board at this time to give him the opportunity to decide whether he wants to go forward on an appeal or whether he'd like to come back in 30 days and try for a variance?
After hearing this discussion, I believe it would be prudent to let him make a decision whether he proceeds as an appeal as we have determined it to be, or if he feels some other avenue.
Thank you.
Give him,
One last question, I'll let it drop. What would be the variance? What ordinance would they be varying from?
Right.
Well, it would be an exception pursuant to 641023 as to whether or not, in essence, they have a hardship if they were not allowed to. I mean, and this is just speculation, but
they got denied and they're appealing it.
If there's an ordinance saying that you can't build into a side yard setback, there's not an ordinance.
There's no ordinance that says they can't do what they want to do. All they're appealing the decision of the DRB
Which was
to not grant them the CLE.
Which was an aesthetic judgment.
It's an aesthetic judgment.
Right.
And we,
But the aesthetic judgment, according to their rules and guidelines, says it has to be based on the zoning ordinance, and until we hear something that they based it on, I think we can make a decision as to whether that denial was appropriate.
I mean, just speaking for myself, I'd like to review the DRB's minutes from this case. I mean, it'd be difficult to say whether or not they acted appropriately if we don't know what they said.
Can we get those tonight? I mean, is that the DRB minutes? Is that something we can get quickly, or is that going to be a...
We have action minutes only. Do you have those?
We don't have verbatim. I can get them. We don't have verbatim minutes, but I have the action minutes. But actually, their comments are in your staff report.
So the motion and the comments as to why they were denying it is what's been stated here.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, at this time, let's call the applicant forward to present. If you would state your name and address, please, and maybe you can clear some of this up for us.
Yeah, my name is Dennis Fila. Address is 245 Holly Ridge Way, Roswell. My company is Vergola Atlanta. We installed the adjustable patio cover for Old Blind Road Pub. That was in the May-June timeframe of this year. Basically, we are appealing their decision based on much of what you have said. No ordinance was stated. Their main objection that evening was that it may get moldy or mildewed and it'd be unsightly. So, I didn't understand the argument at the time. I tried to point out, well, windows get moldy and mildew if you don't maintain them. That's a function of maintenance. And mold, mildew, that's an organic substance. It has to have something to feed on, which is pollen, any decayed leaves, anything like that. And it's simply a matter of you take a light detergent, water, and you wash it. There's absolutely no reason to think that these curtains would not be maintained. First of all, is everyone aware of exactly what kind of curtains we're talking about? I mean, I do have pictures of some typical types. These are the curtains you see in hundreds of locations in the metropolitan area. It's simply the vinyl clad curtains of vinyl material. Usually it's at least partially solid colored, typically with a clear vinyl in the center to act in essence as a window. The curtains that we're proposing, we actually took it a little step further. They are going to be the roll-up type, so they are not going to be in position 100% of the time. On a nice mild day, you roll them up. They're only used in cold weather. The curtains themselves, when rolled up, we plan on constructing a balance that virtually would hide them once they're in a stored position. The patio itself is not in any way, shape, or form enclosed. By that I mean the louvered system that we put in is adjustable. They literally open and close. At the ends of each are a gutter system. It's open air that flows through there. So it's certainly not conditioned air. Yes, heaters would exist and they would provide some degree of comfort. It is not going to heat the air. They are infrared heaters. They heat objects, that's all. It will not be a heated room in any sense of the word. So it's really a way of cutting down on wind, making it a little more pleasant so folks can sit out there and enjoy the patio atmosphere. So the curtains, again, we thought that we actually did a better job of most installations because we added the side panels, which I think if you folks have the submittal that we turned into the review board, we've added the side panels, which allowed us to do either a glass or a plexiglass type of installation to give it a stained glass appearance, which complements other stained glass within the restaurant. So it made a tighter, neater job of the weather curtain installation because it squared off the opening. Rather than have jagged cuts trying to go around the caps of those brick columns that you may see, we provided a nice tight installation. So we thought we're actually doing a good job by adding that. As far as framing, I'll concede that technically you call it framing. It's light framing. It's meant to hold a piece of plexiglass. It is not structural in any sense. All structural activity took place on the original permit with the installation of the columns, the patio cover system itself. This is like a 2x2. It's going to hold a piece of plexiglass. So, but we technically, I guess you would call that framing, so we sought the permit. So, based on that, again, the arguments we've heard were that it may get mildew, it may be unsightly. And I may have specifically asked, are you turning us down because you're saying this is a material that might get dirty, might get mildew, it might not be cleaned, and therefore we probably shouldn't do it? And their answer basically was yes. So, we're appealing the reason, their decision and what it's founded on. Yes, sir.
I've got your little cutout here of the different vinyls. Is it the one here in the bottom that...
I believe that's it,
It's
yes.
a .019. It's called Clear. It's pretty flexible compared to the other ones. The other ones seem different degrees of rigidity, but it's down here at the bottom.
It is. Now, it is a lighter grade, but the purpose of that is twofold. Number one, it allows the flexibility to roll it up.
Okay.
Number two, it is the standard for weather curtains. When you get into the high rigidity, you don't have flexibility. It's more like you'd see on a boat curtain that's not typically rolled up in a tight ball. So, and then again, some people actually use it as, when you get into the real thick stuff, they use it as a barrier. They don't roll it up, they don't fold it up, and it's nothing.
And then looking at the specs, and I love reading specs because being an engineer, that's next to being a great thing, but I didn't see anything about life expectancy so I think I recall some of them saying that they were concerned about the length of time and such. I mean, in all honesty, I guess plastic does decompose if exposed to UV light over time. Is this more or less, I didn't see any kind of UV qualifications in here.
I can give that. Typically, the curtains would be given 5-6 year life expectancy, but that's kind of a pull it out of the air. It's like, okay, what part of the country are you in? How often do you use it? How many hours a day are they exposed to the elements? So now they clearly state, though, that if maintained properly, you can expect to go well beyond that.
When you say louver, where's the louver actually found on this system?
A flat ceiling on the, let me look at the picture that you're looking at. It's
that's a horizontal.
Are you looking at the post installation view?
I saw the word louvered in here, and I was just curious.
Those actually are louvers. They're 8-inch louvers.
That's existing.
That's the ceiling.
Which overlap and interlock. So the system actually has like a moisture sensor on it. If it starts raining, they all shut. It's totally surrounded by a gutter system so that any runoff is channeled to downspouts, which are hidden within the columns.
And that's existing, or that's part of the proposed construction?
No, that's existing.
Okay.
That's existing. I mean, it was always our intention to sort of a second phase, install the weather curtains. But, again, back in May and June, it was pretty hot. It's like, it'd be silly to spend the money now let's, when the fall comes down, cooler weather, then we, do that project. But of course, that's long before the board may turn this down.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I do have a question, and it's in relation to the durability of the product. I just want clarification of what's in my packet. At the end of my packet, there's a material data sheet for Robeco.
Robeco, yes, that's the vinyl. Or I'm sorry, that's the clear vinyl.
All right, and it's a 20 mil gauge
Right.
vinyl. It states in here storage. Avoid storage in direct sunlight, which it'll be used in direct sunlight. Avoid high temperatures and or high humidity. Recommended storage condition is 50 degrees to 80 degrees, which in the use here would be, I'm assuming in temperatures below 50 degrees, and less than 50% humidity. Shelf life 6 months when stored in unwound condition.
Right. And it would never be stored in an unwound condition. Again, they would be wound up, hidden within a balance, away from any UV, any rain, any weather.
Right, what I'm trying to apply that to is when it's not in a wound position, it would be in place, correct?
Yes.
Exposed to sunlight, elements, temperature extremes, and humidity.
Right.
Wouldn't that lead you to believe that it would have less than 6 months shelf life then?
Well, but again, it's not being stored. I mean, that's in use, and that's when it's also going to be maintained. In the down position, that's when you would clean it, that's when you would basically perform any maintenance on it.
Yeah, they say avoid storage in those
Stored
conditions.
Position.
Yeah, you can't store it in those conditions.
I mean, if you left it out on the ground, opened up, exposed to the elements, yeah, probably. But then again, that's where you would have perhaps rain hitting it, standing water on it. I mean, it's not made to sit on the water.
All right.
So your structure was built with the intent of putting the vinyl on the original structure, is that correct? Or was the vinyl sort of an afterthought, or?
No, but again, there was no need for it at that time.
Okay.
I mean, simply like, you don't need weather curtains in June. I mean, I would have loved to point out a lot of restaurants in the area that have it. It's like, well, it's a little early. Restaurants really aren't, they're just starting to put these weather curtains out.
Yeah, there's one close to you that already has one in there.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, across the street.
Now, and with that, let me give you about a dozen letters here from direct neighbors. Lessees of Old Blind Dog Pub. These are businesses that surround the pub. And they're all for it. I mean, it's an establishment, it's rather unique, and it draws business to the area. So the other businesses benefit by the success of Blind Dog, put it that way. And these are, in some cases, competing restaurants, but, they see the value, and I think, well, not to get into a ordinance thing, so I'll leave that up to you.
Now, you say there's other businesses, I mean, you're here, you're in front of us, tell us what other businesses. I mean, I want to know which...
Circulating letters.
No, those are businesses that are supportive. I'm saying, give me the businesses that have these type of vinyl curtains on them. Can you give me some names? Or similar ones that are in the area, whether it's in our community or other communities, doesn't matter. I'd like to know where they're at.
Oh, you can go to what's on Windward here at the end. They have that black sort of structure out. There was a patio.
Cabernet?
Yes. You can go to Hooters, you can go to Fridays. Anybody that has a patio.
Does Cam's across the street from you have the...
They do. They do. Well, it's not the same only in finish, let me put it that way. And it is clear vinyl, and it's more clear, almost like an entire wall. They have like a little border around it of the material. And the vinyl material that they use, that's generally the solid color, that's where they apply grommets, Velcro, some type of fastening device.
Are you using any kind of grommets, Velcro, or any kind of snaps to keep them secured?
There probably will be, but I'm not the curtain guy, let me put it to you that way. There will be a bar in the bottom of the curtain, basically used for weight to hold it down.
Okay, are you with the restaurant, or are you with?
No, I'm the contractor that installed it.
I want to make sure that's what I thought, so, okay, so you're willing to build whatever they ask, so. Right?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
No relation.
Is anyone here from the restaurant?
Yes. Okay. Jeff Costa is the general manager. He's also listed on that initial proposal here.
Jeff Cocosta, 1414 Golf Smith Drive, Roswell, Georgia. I'm the general manager for the Okay, well, it's to what Dennis said. I mean, this was all built to cover our patio, offer us another place to have people dine. It's been up there 4 months now, 5 months now. I mean, we spent a lot of money on it. If y'all have been to the pub, you've seen the money we spent on the pub. We're not somebody to put up a temporary structure or to just slap something together. The long build out was an expensive build out. It took a lot of time and effort to make that as authentic as possible. With the patio on there, that's a nice place. I mean, it's solidly built, it's well built. There's posts that are, put into the ground. The louver system is unique to the city. There's like one other business that has two other businesses in the whole state of Georgia that have this system.
Speaking of which, is that automated?
It is.
Really?
It's automatic to the moisture in the air, and we also have a remote control. We can open it to any level we want. We can time it to follow the sun, as the sun goes, through the air. So, I mean, it's a really, really cool system. And we've had nothing but compliments, not only from the people that dine with us, but from our competitors. I mean, Milton's right up the road. They're all for us doing this. They know it brings business. The business across the street that has stapled theirs to 2x or 4x4s on the patio hasn't spent even a fraction of what we're planning on spending on this. So, to us, I mean, we've spent that much money. We're not going to let curtains be up there that aren't perfect and pristine. If they decay or if they mold or if they wrinkle or start to decompose, we'll be the first ones to yank it off and put something else up because we've spent a lot of money on there. Yes, sir.
Question, has the contractor given you a life cycle estimate? How soon do you think you'll have to be replacing these because they'll start getting
I've heard anywhere from 3 to 5 years, if not longer, if you maintain them correctly. The other part of this is a temporary structure. We're using this basically probably from November through February, maybe halfway into March, depending upon the weather. But that's it. The rest of the year, it stays open.
Will it come down? I mean, the framing will be there permanently.
Yeah, the frame is, and the whole idea is to winch the curtains up into a balance.
Yeah.
So the curtains are kept up there all the time. But, from middle of March through right now, it's still open. I probably got people on the patio right now sitting out there eating with the louvers open and the sides open. So you're talking 4 or 5 months out of the year, so I don't know if that represents a permanent structure.
I guess the reason I'm asking, obviously the DRB's concern was the longer term and what this is going to look like in 3 to 5 years. You mentioned that time frame. Is it in your budget, is it in your 5-year plan to replace these on an ongoing basis?
Yes.
So that when they start looking cloudy or unsightly or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, we budget we have in our budget, we have money to, clean the place every night. We have a crew that comes in every single night and spends 6 hours from midnight until 6 a.m. cleaning the floors, cleaning the ceiling, lighting, polishing everything. We have our staff on site every day. We spend money on probably $750,000 a week just to keep our building clean. Again, we didn't spend that kind of money on the beginning to have it deteriorate. So, we would definitely be the first ones to yank it down without anybody having to tell us, hey, it's getting to the point where it's not acceptable.
But I think if you had an opportunity to actually see the patio at Glenwood Club, I think you'd be impressed. It was built to stand the last, believe me. It's probably, I mean, we probably got more 5-inch steel posts in that patio than they have in the whole building. So, and it's not coming down. We have triple 18-inch LVLs to span it. It's got, you know, I don't know how many coats of paint on it. I mean, it was done very professionally, and it complements the restaurant beautifully.
Complements the rest of the development, too. It fits in perfectly with the rest of the development. The landlord's behind it, the landlord's behind us, you know, closing the patio, so, yes, sir.
Now, Jeff, I've heard from Dennis, I don't want to, you heard him say it again. What was the reason you felt the design review board turned down your application? I don't see anything, Dennis.
I was there too, and it was strictly, they were concerned about mold and mildew. And can't tell you enough the time and effort we put into cleaning our building and cleaning the things in our building, and I can't do anything more than tell you the first sign of that. If we can't get it clean, we tear it down and start over again.
So
We're up there.
what was their response when you said to them just what you've said to us?
They're like, we're sorry, we just think there's going to be mold and mildew, and nobody else around you has these vinyl curtains because of that reason. And we have turned down 2 to 3 businesses because of that reason. I look out across the street of my building every day and see the one at Cans. I walk up to Milton's and talk to Jimmy Carter, the GM, and I see his. And I see businesses everywhere in the city that have these curtains, so I don't understand. And they're a lot less effort and quality in their construction than ours.
Mr. Attorney?
So it appears to me from reading this packet that one of the other concerns that the Board of Zoning and/or the city had in general was that this alters the use classification of your property and that it exceeds the allowable heated square feet. Would you care to address that? I mean, that would be a legitimate reason.
That's the biggest consideration for me.
It's not permanent.
It's not permanent.
Staff already said it would not.
It would not.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I got that from the community development
So
director.
I'm reading the building plan review. Framed panels would alter the use classification. Is that true or not true?
We're not talking about frame panels here. When we, in the process, they showed us a product that was literally a window instead of glass that was vinyl in it. And we informed them that would, if they installed those, that would increase the square footage.
Okay, so what we're just discussing here would be these roll-up, which would not alter the use classification, would not be considered heated square feet.
Correct, because they're temporary.
All right. That's.
Yeah, we would only use it 4.5 months out of the year. The rest of the time it's sitting wide open as it is today.
Go ahead. Mr. Attorney.
Question for staff. Is mold and mildew part of the health inspection? I mean, if these things have mold and mildew on them, wouldn't it adversely affect their health inspection score?
I
mean,
don't
does that
know
kind
if
of-
we can speak to the Fulton County Health
So it says
Inspector.
Fulton County, that's right, I forgot. Okay, thank you.
Being through health inspections, it probably would.
I would think it would.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Sir, are you here to make a comment at all?
Only if I have to.
You're more than welcome to if you'd like.
It's just a fan.
Hang on one second. So can we clarify, are you seeking an appeal?
Yes.
Okay. We need to understand.
He's on the record.
I do want to make one more point.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, the DRB turned us down, but it's not like it was all the members, because there was only about, 4 there that evening? So there wasn't even full input to this. You just had enough to hold the meeting.
3-1 beat you.
Okay, at this time, we'd like to close the public hearing. Any questions from the board to staff? At this time, I'd like to open the floor for a motion, since
Mr.
Angela
Chairman,
says...
just before the board considers, I just want to be clear, what we have in front of the board. We have an appeal of the Design Review Board's decision. Let's see, 64-1099 says that the appeal is to establish why the final decision is contrary to law per the zoning ordinance. And that's this board's charge, is to decide whether or not the Design Review Board's decision to deny a certificate of endorsement was contrary to law pursuant to the zoning ordinance.
So it's not these three choices on a secondary variance?
We can affirm.
You can affirm, reverse,
Based on what you
clarify if necessary, but that is the basis for affirming or denying would be whether it was contrary to law pursuant to the zoning ordinance.
So then my question to staff would be, those of you that were there for the DVR meeting, do you feel that turning a applicant down because there could be too much mold was the correct decision? I mean,
They can't answer that.
We're trying. You ready to start a motion? Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to, hopefully use the right term, appeal the decision of the Design Review Board.
It's either
Number two.
Okay, I would like to reverse an order
No, it was a
of
decision.
the-
It was a decision.
of the Design Review Board to allow them the use of vinyl curtains for a temporary basis on the patio involving petition V10-014 at 12650 Crabapple Road. The reason for that decision is that I felt that the long-term upkeep of vinyl curtains was more of a maintenance issue and not a structural issue or design issue that would cause a problem with the general character and upkeep of the community.
That's the denial of the certificate of
But that
endorsement.
makes sense.
Before we move on, I think at some point you've got to get into the denial of the certificate of endorsement.
Yeah, that's the decision.
That's the
we're
decision
reversing.
that you're reversing.
We're reversing the
On the front
decision
page.
to deny the issuance of the certificate of endorsement.
There you go.
Okay, I am reversing the denial certificate of endorsement for the vinyl weather curtains.
Correct.
This is based on Article 64-1024.
Correct.
Second.
Okay.
Sorry about
I gotta disagree, and the reason being is not that I think that Old Blind Dog will allow their vinyl curtains to mold, mildew. I don't think that there'll be maintenance issues at all, and in fact, I think they're good members of the community. I just think that the DRB acted within its auspices when they made that decision. I mean, as we've established, it's an aesthetic judgment. They decided that it was not, in keeping with the neighborhood. They've denied several other businesses the right to have these type of curtains, and there's an established precedent there. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in the position where we have to say strictly, did they act within their boundaries, left and right limits, or did they not? And I feel like the DRB did.
I would disagree on these grounds. I think they have to, according to their guidelines and criteria in 64-1018, when they issue a certificate or deny, it has to be based on the criteria of the zoning ordinance. And from what I've heard from staff, they didn't make that argument. They didn't say, because the overlay says this about aesthetics and this it violates those aesthetic notions, we are denying you. They just said, we just don't like it, so we're denying you, is what it sounds like to me. And I think they were outside of their guidelines, which is spelled out here, that it does have to be rooted in the ordinance, in the zoning ordinance. And unless they can, that's why I'm always saying, for us as a board, we need to say why we're voting the way we're voting, because if we get reversed, we want to be able to say, this is the ordinance, this is why we voted the way we did.
And not only would I agree with Scott, that's exactly why this board was put here, was to make decisions that other people or the city of Milton have made that we don't think were the right decisions. And that's the only reason we're here. And we're the only board that nobody can overturn, and they have to take it to a court of law. So I'm with Scott 100%. I don't think they acted correctly in their decision, and turning somebody down because of a mold issue or because they didn't think it would look terrific after 5 to 6 years, I don't think was an appropriate denial. Any other discussion?
And I did look through the ordinance, because I thought, well, they must have based it on something, because there's a lot of verbiage in the overlay about aesthetics and the way we want our community to look. And I just couldn't find anything that even hinted at this type of a treatment being unsightly or not maintainable or not looking good over time or anything like that. I couldn't find it in any of the building regulations for the overlay.
So the question is, in the absence of specific guidance within the confines of the overlay of that particular area or elsewhere in the zoning ordinance, is the DRB bound to not make a statement one way or the other, or an aesthetic judgment, or are they bound simply to what is written? Now, I would say that, in the absence of any other guidance, then they're able to make a judgment call.
Yeah, and I think the staff said that they do have leeway and that they do make judgment calls, but I think their guidelines say that it sort of has to be based on the ordinance itself. It can't be just completely out in left field in terms of their opinion. I think it does still need to be rooted in or based in what's stated in the ordinance, and this just is, I just don't see any place in the ordinance where there's, yes, they can make opinions, but the opinions have to be based on something, and I don't see a basis for this opinion here.
Can I
Yes, sir.
ask some clarification from staff?
Sure.
Can staff affirm whether or not that the proposal that we have here is exactly what went before the board, design review board?
PDF from David.
Okay, we have a motion, and that is to reverse the appeal of decision of the Design Review Board, which was denial of certificate of endorsement for vinyl weather curtains for 12650 Crabapple Road, petition number V10-014. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Let it be known that it passed 6-1. Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
You're sure welcome.
And keep making that house salad with the salmon. That stuff's delicious.
We have to go over there and eat. Huh?
Yeah, we'll all be over there tomorrow night to eat dinner.
That was the best salad.
Right.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Well, wait, other business. Anything?
Quickly, there was a discussion about revising the side yard, rear yard criteria for outdoor fireplaces. We're considering outdoor fireplaces entirely, about whether or not we should be seeing so many of these, or if there should be a modification of the
You mean
zoning
the
ordinance.
DRB comments?
Right.
Okay. Are you
Is that going to go before council, or is that something
no,
that's just
I mean,
gonna-
no, not unless a board directs us to look at that. I mean, if that's what you want us to do, we can.
Okay, just curious now.
We voted, I don't know if you were here, but we voted as a board to hear all of them.
Right.
They forgot their vinyl.
But I would like to, I mean, really, I would like a rewrite of that, because I kind of agree that for us to continue to hear this, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it seems like it's coming more and more often.
Yeah.
And then the other one I'd like to do is,
Which one? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry about the fire pits being inside the
We already
rear.
voted on that.
Well, she said she didn't know that they were supposed to do it.
Well, they're not supposed to do anything. We voted that we wanted to see them.
No, but I'm saying if you rewrite the ordinance, then we wouldn't have to keep
Well, that was-
We wouldn't, and that, or even begin to rewrite the ordinance unless you all direct us to that.
There's other areas, other ordinances that we can rewrite, like curtains.
No, I'm saying I'd like you to rewrite the
Fences.
ordinance to allow that.
Okay, do we need any other business?
Okay, and then the other one I'd sure like to have you guys consider is the one about the horse rings that are covered. We had a horse ring in here that was over 40,000 square feet, and I forget what your limit is, but...
25,000.
But again, I would like to do some kind of change involving horse rings or barns that are over a certain size. I think, we're supposed to be a horse community, and we're not supporting those type of uses. And there are horse rings presently here in the community that are larger than 35,000, and I think...
So, if we wanted to make an alteration to the zoning ordinance, could we ask you to look into that and then come back and we can talk it in other business next month?
Absolutely.
Would we like to do that?
If you would give us a little bit more time than maybe next month. We have
I
about
understand.
3 different text amendments going on right now
That's fine.
that are from other boards.
60 days?
So,
Whatever. I mean,
yeah,
Just whenever you get it back to us.
December or something.
And what is it that
make it our Christmas
you
gift.
want us, you want to increase the size?
I'd like to increase the
location,
size
or-
and perhaps the, in other words, pertaining it strictly to equestrian facilities. In other words, I think the old one was really saying no structure shall be over a certain
No
size.
football stadium, no
So,
domes.
so what we're trying to say is, well, we'd like to zoom that in a little bit and say it's a structure. And then the second thing is that when we do have riding rings, that we don't have to have a pasture that has to have a buffer. A landscape.
Overlay buffer. That's just when it was inside the overlay, though.
Right, but that's
It's
another
outside
one
the
where
overlay,
you say
yeah.
where it's inside the overlay. I mean, it doesn't need another buffer if it's a horse ring or something used, I guess the better way to say is recreational use. That would also help us with our parks that we're looking at, that we don't wind up having to have a buffer around our parks. So recreational use of any land would not necessarily have to have a landscape buffer. How's that?
We can do that. Let me give you just a little bit more background, too.
Sure.
We are looking at many different text amendments over the course of this next year.
Sure.
In fact, the Planning Commission has put together a priority list.
Oh, okay, I'm
We've
sorry.
probably got about 18 months' worth of work on there.
No.
And that's okay. But as part of that, we're going to address agricultural uses, trying to encourage our agricultural uses,
Sure.
and give them some more flexibility. We can either roll these suggestions into that, which would come later. It wouldn't be necessarily a Christmas gift, but we could roll them into that, or we could bring them separately as smaller kind of piecemeal text changes. So,
Talk with the mayor and council. Don't talk to us. I mean, let them make your decision. You work for them. So we can give you guidance and say, I think those are things to consider, but ultimately your bosses are...
well, one of the things I'm looking for too is the horse community is getting itself organized.
Okay.
They have made a couple of presentations to staff. They're going to try to make a presentation to the council here in November. And then they're going to also try to make a presentation to the Planning Commission, just to kind of let folks know that they're around, they're available to answer questions, because these are the kinds of things that we need to take before them and say, what do you really need? Here's what we think you need, but what do you really need? So, yeah, if you'll give us just a little time, hopefully we'll get their buy-in and input on these changes too. So, that's good.
Okay, great.
Any other business? Anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Somebody?
I'll second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Good night.
I thought I turned this one off.